In July 2021, the Tuners DLC was added to GTA Online and it was pretty universally liked. A DLC about car culture on a game about stealing cars? Who would have thought? With it we had 17 new cars added across the sports, muscle and sedans classes, but all of them had a secondary class called Tuners that was just for them. And we got new street races that were only for Tuners as well. While not all cars were as quick as others, in general they all handled somewhat well and we had a good balance at the top of the class with pretty much 4 different cars on the top pace. Those were the Calico GTF, Vector, Growler and Sultan RS Classic. The Jester RR sat in 5th place for lap time but was just off the pace of the other 4. These cars also had some interesting nuances because they had access to low grip tyres which allowed them to be much more prone to drifting. You could also set the vehicle's stance in the interaction menu to lowered, which also helped to get the car sideways. Doing either of these things would ruin the car's handling for races of course, and doing both would be suicide. But there was one extra benefit to adding both low grip tyres and lowered stance that wasn't to do with drifting, and it related to top speed. You see, when these cars were set up in this way, they'd be able to reach insane top speeds in a straight line. The Comet S2, which had the highest top speed in this setup, was able to reach over 160 mph when its normal top speed was only 123. Some other cars benefited from it a lot too, like the Calico being able to reach over 150 mph. Naturally, you wouldn't be able to turn even the slightest corner and there'd be no point in using the car for anything other than a bit of crazy high speed fun on a highway, but it was an interesting consequence nevertheless. However, at the time I said something about this little nuance. It remains to be seen whether Rockstar considered this a bug and patch it later down the line, but it's all caused by the same thing and I find it hard to believe that they wouldn't know that this would happen. Indeed, it has come to pass that in the recent Contract DLC, which is the update straight after Tuners, this top speed bug for all the tuner cars has been patched out. You'll no longer be able to reach crazy top speeds in any tuner car by setting lowered vehicle stance and low grip tyres. As an example, the Comet S2 I just spoke about now goes over 30 mph slower in this setup, maxing out at around 128 mph instead of over 160. It is still slightly quicker than it is by default in a normal setup, but you get all of the negatives of the bad handling without much of a benefit now. There's a decent number of cars that even have higher top speeds than this by default anyway, like the Pariah and Italia RSX. If you are interested in why this was a bug and not just a feature, there's a whole host of links in the description for more background info, most importantly Fact Finding episode 20 which explains how all of these top speed bugs come about, then all the other videos covering this bug from when the Tuners DLC was actually released. If you're really interested, they're all linked down below in the description for more background info. Now, ordinarily, fixing this top speed bug wouldn't be too much of a big deal. It was unintended behaviour after all, and it didn't really affect much. Yes, it would be nicer if all cars were a bit quicker in a straight line, especially open wheel cars which top out at about 120 mph and have way too much grip to the point where they become boring to drive, but given you completely ruined the handling of these tuners to get to these top speeds, it wasn't exactly a game changer, it was just a bit of silly fun. The problem, however, is in the way that Rockstar has fixed the issue, because it has not only stopped these cars from achieving those higher top speeds, but also made them a bit worse to drive and slower across the board even in their regular setups. Their regular setup top speeds haven't actually changed, so that's all the same as my original testing videos, and that's also why I test top speed without bugs and glitches in the first place, but they are noticeably slower around a lap and they can't handbrake boost, otherwise known as mid-drive speed boost or even more inaccurately double clutch, which is an important thing for drifters to be able to utilise. It's kind of ironic that Rockstar finally released cars that are aimed at the drifting community with low grip tyres and vehicle stancing, then in the next update they remove a key feature that drifters use from those cars. So what's actually happened? There was an awful lot of speculation initially that the advanced handling flags that made cars like the Entity XXR and Taipan so awful to drive have been added to the tuner cars, but that's not the case. They would feel significantly worse to drive if that had happened. Instead, these tuner cars have been given the Viserys treatment. You see, when the Viserys was first released, it experienced a similar top speed bug to that of the tuners. In the case of the Viserys, it had a crazy high top speed by default, and when it was damaged, it was even faster to ridiculous proportions, much faster than any of the tuners went with low grip tyres and lowered stance. And it was all caused by the same thing that all top speed bugs are caused by in this game, as I explain in more detail in episode 20 of this fact-finding series. Well, the way Rockstar fixed this was by basically artificially capping the speed of the car. The consequence of how they did this was that it would get up the gears really quickly, not accelerate as well as it did before, and not be able to handbrake boost. I'll show some footage on screen shortly showing what happens when you try to handbrake boost the Viserys. When you try to do it, the car will just stop doing anything while the revs are hitting the limiter, only starting to accelerate again when the engine has calmed down. Ordinarily, the engine hitting the limiter in such a way would make the car accelerate even faster, which is how the handbrake boost works in the first place. And this is exactly what they've done to the tuners. Every single tuner car has had the Viserys fix applied to it, meaning all of them get up the gears really quickly, can't hit those crazy high top speeds anymore with the lowered stance and low grip tyres setup, and can't handbrake boost at slow speeds, with the car basically again not doing anything until the engine calms down. And because the cars are ramping up the gears so quickly after the change, they're basically a bit less powerful on acceleration, where it feels like it takes a while to get up to speed out of slow speed corners. Now, for most people this isn't going to be much of an issue. The vast majority of people probably won't even notice, especially given the change to performance of these cars isn't huge for some of them. For example, some cars like the Tailgater S, Dominator ASP and Previan are all barely affected from a lap time perspective, only losing 1 or 2 tenths of a second over a lap. Some cars, however, do have a bigger change in performance. A prime example is the ZR350, which was already a pretty slow car for the tuners class, going almost 1 second per lap slower after the change in comparison to how it performed previously. But even in this situation, these cars don't suddenly drive terribly. They're still perfectly usable, unlike what would have been the case had the Entity XXR advanced handling flags been applied, for example. But for those in the racing community who like to utilise short shifting to manipulate the gears to give better acceleration, and those in the drifting community who like to utilise the handbrake boost to help get the cars sideways, these changes are noticeable and problematic, especially for drifters who are arguably the target audience of these cars in the first place. The overall weaker engines and lack of ability to handbrake boost makes for a much less interesting drifting experience. Or so I'm told, I've never been much of a drifter myself. When it comes to the performance of the big 5 cars at the top of the tuners class, they've all gotten slower, with the top 3 losing about half a second per lap. However, their new lap times actually make the top 3 slightly closer together, even if they are slower in comparison to before, and therefore slower in comparison to everything else in the sports class of which they are members too. The Growler is the big loser though, now being around a second per lap slower, while the Jester RR wasn't as badly affected, only losing around 2 tenths of a second per lap. The order of the top 5 has actually remained exactly the same, it's just the gaps between them have changed, and the fact that they're all slower and less fun to drive relative to their previous performances. Naturally, this has been done by Rockstar to fix a bug, which is reasonable, and they've applied the Viserys fix because it worked before and nobody complained about it. Well, to be fair, I and others in the racing community did complain about the Viserys change at the time, but we just wanted a car that had a good straight line speed for once, honestly. We understood that they decided to fix it. The lack of ability to handbrake boost really doesn't affect racing too much for those of us in the racing community. It's very rare that you use it in a racing situation. But it is of a significant consequence to the drifting community, and given these tuner cars were pretty much made for them, the backlash to this change has been more substantial. Every day since the contract DLC, I've had comments on videos, Twitter, Twitch chat and elsewhere, all asking me to cover what Rockstar has done to the tuner cars, and I understand why. In my personal opinion, while yes, having the tuners be able to reach those crazy high top speeds with the right setup was obviously unintended, it also wasn't harming anyone. We've got rocket powered Batmobiles and flying bikes. Does having some cars that have higher top speeds in a setup that completely ruins them for any use except getting to those high top speeds really pose that much of a problem to the game? Just like with the Viserys when that was nerfed, I complained about how one of the most enjoyable vehicles to race with at a higher level because of its top speed wasn't really hurting anyone by existing, but that car remains a shell of its former self. The question is, will that happen to the tuners? It's impossible to say right now, but I'd at least like to see this change reverted. Not only for the drifters to have back the cars that were serving them very well with no complaints in a universally well received DLC, but also for those who would prefer to drive better versions of the cars, because there's no doubting that there's no aspect to this change that is a positive. The tuners now have worse performance, driving experience and drifting experience, with nothing gained as a consequence of that except fixing a bug that was actually pretty fun and most would probably have preferred to remain. With Expanded and Enhanced the next thing to come to GTA Online, we'll have to see how they handle cars then. There could be more major changes, but I fear the tuners might end up getting forgotten about during the process of getting that sorted. If anything major changes, I'll make a new video and link it in the pinned comment in the description of this video, and if they revert these changes back, I'll mention it in those same places too. If you're watching this video in the future and neither of those two things are mentioned below this video, then these cars are still in this overall universally negative state. We'll see what Rockstar choose to do about it. That does pretty much wrap it up for this one. Keep an eye out for another fact-finding video coming soon about spoilers and downforce, which is going to go into detail to explain how the Italia RSX and Comet S2, which is another tuner, are actually significantly slower than they should be if they were working as they should. Make sure you subscribe for that one because it's been a long time in the making, and for those watching in the future, I'll link that in the description once it's out too. For now though, that'll do us. Hopefully this video has been interesting and insightful. Let me know all your thoughts about it down below in the comments. Thank you all so much for watching and for the support in general, and I'll see you next time.